This morning we filed a lawsuit in Travis County District Court against three main defendants: the Texas Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath, the Texas Education Agency, and the State Board of Education.
Exactly what caused two Texas school districts to decide they had no choice but to sue their own state commissioner of education.
This just came right out of the blue. There's no public notice, no public hearing. The commissioner decided that for the small number of districts that pay recapture, they will get a special deal on their local option homestead exemption.
An unsigned letter from the Texas Education Agency simply began. This letter addresses a change in practice, starting immediately. The letter did not say, however, this change would only benefit a small group of property-wealthy districts to the tune of multi-million-dollar windfalls, and that it would do so at the expense of everyone else. Why the sudden change? Was it because these wealthy districts had been secretly lobbying the Commissioner of Education to get this special deal? Why the sudden change without any public notice or discussion, especially since this change was a complete reversal of nearly 2 decades of adherence to the former practice by no less than 6 previous commissioners and interims? And it seemed odd that this costly change would happen in a session in which the state was already struggling just to make ends meet.
What TEA has done is say, we're going to recognize that optional homestead exemption, but we're only going to recognize it for property wealthy districts. We're not going to recognize it for all districts.
Since the passage of Senate Bill 4 in 1999, the Texas Education Agency, the Legislative Budget Board, and every school finance consultant in the state of Texas have interpreted the provision to compensate school districts for the loss of local tax revenue due to local optional homestead exemptions to require an appropriation or the identification of surplus funds in the foundation school program. Neither the law nor the rules that interpret the law have changed. The cost to the state of Texas to provide such compensation has never been reflected in the TEA's legislative appropriations request, nor in the LBB models of FSP costs. This new interpretation has the potential to divert hundreds of millions of FSP dollars to property wealthy districts, at the expense of those that are property poor in the absence of a transparent and public discussion by policymakers about the implications. Texas taxpayers deserve better.
We don't have enough money as it is to meet the needs of our kids. Any kind of special deal that benefits wealthy districts over the rest of us, it's just not fair to our kids. Any kind of rule change that's being implemented like this to this level of impact in the state, it should be out in the open where everybody can see what's going to happen so we can know before it's implemented.
His whole intent was to give more money to the wealthy school districts.
What the commissioner has done here has to create essentially an arbitrary advantage for those very limited pockets of our state, certain property wealthy districts, in terms of how recapture is calculated, and has given them that advantage on the backs of students who live in property poor school districts.
Houston has a 20% local homestead exemption. Waukegan has a 20% homestead exemption. Houston taxes at $1.03 under their maintenance and operation. Waukegan taxes at $1.17. There's a difference there, and as you look then, Houston under this deal is getting $60 million this year, and thereafter gets $60 million. Waukegan's getting nothing out of this. It's just not fair for our kids. Money should be evenly distributed to all our kids.
It's about as arbitrary and capricious as you can possibly get, and frankly, it's mean-spirited.
TEA should have undergone a public notice and rulemaking, a series of steps where it was going to make this interpretation public. It should have received feedback. It should have heard about the detrimental impact that this type of interpretation would have had on property poor school districts. And there's a reason those requirements are in place. But here, what the commissioner did was he circumvented those rules. He circumvented those requirements. He made this decision arbitrarily.
In order to make a rule, you have to go through certain procedures that are laid out in the Administrative Procedures Act in order to have the rule passed. Some of those steps include filing notice in the register. You have to give notice to the public and give them an opportunity to comment, as well as you have to, and most importantly I think in this instance, is provide a fiscal note which shows the potential financial estimates or financial implications of any rule or proposed rule that you're trying to impose. And in this case, the Commissioner of Education, is our belief, didn't go through or take any of those steps prior to issuing this letter and this statement on February 1st of this year.
The legislature has no more money, and the only way they can get money to enrich the rich is to take it through proration from the lower wealth school districts.
We believe that it was somewhat a surprise to a lot of people, and we believe that there are a lot of individuals in the legislature and around school districts in Texas that have no idea what the Commissioner of Education is attempting to do, and especially the ramifications of such a rule.
The Commissioner of Education's recent actions regarding the local option homestead exemption and granting it for Chapter 41 districts, or granting credit for it with Chapter 41 districts that have a local option homestead exemption, is going to have a negative impact on the school finance system. It's going to be negative from several standpoints. One is that the fact that it's going to have the effect of completely reversing the gains in equity that were made as a result of the West Orange Cove 2 school finance lawsuit and the gains that were made in the following special session in 2006. It's going to be negative from the standpoint it's going to amount in reduced revenue for the state budget, and therefore it's going to reduce the amount of revenue available for the foundation school program. And finally, it's going to be negative for Chapter 42 school districts and for Chapter 41s that don't have a local option homestead exemption, because it's going to reduce the amount of money available to them by reducing the foundation school program. We're essentially taking another slice of the pie and pulling it out and giving it to a special select few rich districts at the expense of all others.
And the legislature hasn't yet really picked up on what's going on, because we're talking about over a period of a biennium, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to be siphoned off to the rich school districts.
Well, that's just if the current Chapter 41 stay where they are, it's going to be hundreds of millions. But if every 41 goes, which you fully intend for them to do because it would be against their economic interest not to adopt a local option homestead exemption, then it's going to cost up to close to $1 billion. And so it's an estimate, but it's also something that you can be pretty sure that it's going to happen. Right now, the interpretation has always been that when the state pays half of a local option homestead exemption, they do so for all districts that have them, 41s or 42s. And the rule that the commissioner is trying to implement is, for lack of a better way to put it, is discriminatory toward Chapter 42 districts, in that the state will only pay half of the local option homestead exemptions for Chapter 41 districts in every year. For Chapter 42 districts, the only time that they will have their local option homestead exemptions, or half of their local option homestead exemptions, reimbursed to them by the state is in the event of a surplus or an appropriation.
Even before this change occurred, generally speaking, property wealthy districts, the most property wealthy districts, tax about 10 cents less but earn almost $1,000 more per student than property poor districts. That was our reality here in Texas before this change was made. It is unclear why the commissioner thought it would be a good idea, knowing that that gap existed, to give even further advantage to property wealthy districts, especially at the cost of property poor districts.